Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another lovely week with me and Barry here. Just laughing at my trials and tribulations when it comes to fridge freezers. So that's not what the show is about today. The show today is about clear agreements and commitments, and
what happens, and also what happens when those things change things, when things like that change. Because this thing about I want to talk about in this conversation, because this was inspired by what happened with your experience with fridge freezers.
Okay.
Is that sometimes things shift, and how do we deal with that when they do shift? So it's kind of the whole thing about this conversation.
Yes, that's exactly true. It is. Barry has been wonderfully patient with me throughout this remodel I'm doing here. Which I was just telling him yesterday. They call you the day before and they say, "Okay, we can deliver tomorrow," and you've been waiting months for something, so you've got to be, like, okay.
You gotta be ready, yeah.
So anyway, so agreements and commitments. So Barry, why don't you start us off on this one?
Well, I want to. We talked about. I think we've probably talked about this in the show before about trust and building agreements, that sort of thing. But I want to speak to this about how much value you put into your agreements and commitments with your partner, because we also met relationship-centric conversation here. But also, how do you deal when things are out of your control and things get changed? You have to move things around, or somebody, breaks the agreement. Because the thing about it is, and I think I've talked about this before, that agreement keeping is one of the foundational pieces to build trust with each other. So basically, the more you keep your word, the more you say yes and you say when you follow through, the more trust gets built between two partners. So agreement keeping and commitments are kind of what maintains that. And if we fail to do that, either because we don't care, which is one of the big issues in relationships, or stuff happens and we don't talk about it, because the other part of this, which I want to bring in, is simply if something changes and you're out of your control, you don't inform your partner that it's changed. It's as bad as basically lying to them because you didn't keep them in the loop. So how do you work with agreements and commitments in your relationship? Is kind of the theme.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love what you're saying. And it really is. It's two things. It's not just that it builds up trust, but mutual respect as well.
Yeah.
Because, and I think we've touched on this on so much before, but I think I shared with you when I first came here, I'd never heard the word flaky until I came to California.
Definitely a California word, yeah.
Yeah, because I think in the UK, certainly the way I was brought up was you made a commitment and you stuck to it no matter what. I mean, even if your leg was dropping off, you'd show up. If you said show it up,
yeah.
And I'm still like that. I really, even though Barry might see it differently, because he's the one that's been bearing the brunt of my schedule these last 8, 9, 10 months. Actually, this has been going on. But sometimes by the end of the day, I am just too tired to go out or to, like last night, there was a friend was being interviewed in a series called Icons of Malibu. And I did not want to go, but I had said I would go. I was just tired and exhausted. And that's just something that is ingrained in me is if you say you're going to do something, you do it. You show up. It's not, it's like exercise. It's not something like, oh, do I feel like it today? No, I don't feel like it. It's like, no, brush your teeth, do your exercise, show up to commitments. It's like, that's the one thing that you do. So yeah, and it's about respect, and it's respecting the other person's time.
Yeah.
And that they could have made prior arrangements, not letting people down, all things like that.
Yeah. In fact, underscoring that, I mean, back when we were a lot younger, we didn't have cell phones. I mean, for those who are older to remember that time, which is millennia ago. So the ability to reach out to somebody and be in instant communication wasn't available to us. If they left the house, you could best leave a message. If not, if they had an answering machine, if not, you're basically screwed. You can't communicate with them. So I think perhaps for some of us, because we were raised in that culture where you didn't have an easy way to change the agreement, you just kept it anyway because that was the default. Nowadays, I think it's easy for people, if they use the resource, to text their friend or to call them and say, I'm sorry, I'm running late, or traffic's bad, or the car broke down, or I can't do this, whatever it is, to let the person know you won't be making it, so the person's not sitting there going, "Where are they? I thought they were going to be here."
Yeah.
Because that's the challenge: is that if we don't communicate, the other person doesn't know what's going on.
Hmm. Well, I think you're touching on two. There's two very different. There's that legitimate reasons why something has come up, like your car breaks down, like a delivery that you've been waiting months for, or whatever it is. They're legitimate
Yeah.
reasons why you would want to inform the other person, hey, I'm really sorry, but I this thing has come up. I can't do anything about it. Please, thank you for your understanding, but I have to deal with this.
Hmm.
But there's this other side too, which is just as I was touching on before, which is just that I don't feel like it. And I think there is a culture of blowing people off, and just because you just don't feel like it. And I think we really need to look at that, because that is what will erode at the trust and the respect and the foundation of a good relationship. It's that sort of, as a want of a better word, flakiness. Not that
Right.
you genuinely have, say, a busy life, or things come up and you have to change plans, and hopefully you've got a partner or a friend or whatever it is that is understanding if you do have a job like that. Like my boyfriend is an editor, and he sometimes he'll have a couple of days which is a little light, and then all of a sudden the production company throw masses of stuff at him, and
Hmm.
it's like all our plans go out the window. And I understand that, because I understand the nature of the business, and I understand that there's ebbs and flows, and it's not his fault that he gets slammed with things sometimes. And I'd be
Right.
really, but at the same time, if he's got a sense that that's happening, it's great. Yes, let me know early enough that I can make other plans, or say we were going to go somewhere together and we had tickets for something, you can't come along, then I could offer a ticket to somebody else. Stuff
Right.
like
That's the thing. Again, it comes back to communication, because that's the thing is that, and it's funny because what's coming up in my mind is talking about for a second, just a detour slightly into dating side, which is ghosting. Because in
that.
a way, that flakiness, when you take it back to the beginning, is why ghosting happens. Because the ghosting to me is either one, being afraid to tell the other person you're not interested, or two, just can't be bothered to let the other person know you're not interested. And so the flakiness of not letting your person know you can't be bothered to go out with them, sort of thing, even when you're in a relationship or your best friends, even, is the
Mm,
same vibration, same energetic, which is, are you willing to be honest enough to at least tell them the truth? And that's the thing that a lot of people are afraid of, is not being approved of, because they're reaching out and saying, I'm sorry, I don't want to go with you tonight because I don't feel like it, or because I don't think it's going to work out, or because my bed feels more attractive. So whatever it is you're using is a reason. It's like, at least be honest with the other person and tell the truth.
mhm.
But we don't do that so much anymore, it seems.
Yeah. It's so funny. You're just bringing up something that you've just flashed on in memory. Um, I used to have an ex who couldn't say no to his mother at
Mm.
all. So the mother would say, "Oh, I'll see you next week on this night," and I'd be going, "No, we have plans next. We got this." He goes, "Shh, don't say anything." And I'd be like,
Oh,
why? We already know we can't make it that night. Let's let her know, because I know that she's going to put a lot of effort into cooking, and anticipating us coming over and excited and everything. I said, why would you not give her the warning? And his his thinking was that that was disrespectful to her, because in her mind she wants everybody to drop everything and just show up when she wants you there, which
right,
I didn't think was true. I think I mean, maybe there was a slight bit of that, but to me it was always better give them a week's notice that you're not going to show up. Whereas his thing was, no, you tell her on the morning an emergency came up and you can't make it. And we fought about that all the time, because I just couldn't understand um, the rationale behind that. Why would you let somebody think they're going to see you for a whole week, prepare for that visit, cook for that visit, to then be told last minute, whoops, sorry, an emergency came up? But in his mind, that was better than saying, sorry, we can't make it.
I think I suspect, and I'm not sure if this is accurate. I mean, this is hindsight now, but I wonder if she has some issues with control. Just a thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. But still, I mean, I think as
Yeah,
adults, we can say to our parents, sorry, no, I already have previous plans. Love you. Let's do it another night. But that's not the night we're going to do it. So,
yeah. The challenge for some people, I'm sure, out there are people who basically have never learned how to come out from under their parents' wings, so to speak, and to live their own life and to be able to say no to them and live their own life as an adult themselves. It's
mhm,
like when I know for some people, it's like when mum calls, you feel like you're 5 years old again, sort of thing. There's some part of us that switches gears in our head. So staying in adulthood and staying with your partnership and your relationship and that the priority is
mm,
part of maturation. It's part of that growing up piece. And yes, making commitments to your partner more important than commitments to somebody else, perhaps, or at least making commitments to your partner so important that you don't make commitments to somebody else. That way
mm.
you're clean.
That's really interesting. And again, going back to that relationship, um, I know that the therapists that we would see, or I know that friends in a similar situation would make it very clear that this is just a whole other side shoot here. But when you do enter into a committed relationship or a marriage or whatever, that your commitments and your agreements are to your partner, not to your parents.
Yeah.
Once you're an adult, and I don't mean by any means that you ignore your parents or are cruel or indifferent to them, but when you're a grown up and you enter into an adult relationship and you have your own family, that's the family that you should be committed to. They should
Hmm.
come, not your parents. And I say that with the utmost respect for parents. But again, we're talking about commitments and agreements now. I mean, there are cultures where I mean, this just happened to be an Italian culture, so it was very much sort of mother was revered and put on a pedestal and whatever. But it's very, very important that you know who who your allegiance should be as an adult.
Hmm.
It's to your new family and your new children and your partner, and they, those are the ones that should come first.
That is the choice. And so ultimately, this is the thing that we'll speak to as well, is that all of these agreements and commitments are first of all with ourselves. So if we're in a place where we're having issues with maintaining and keeping that solid agreements with other people, what part of us are we not agreeing to? What part of us are not honoring? And what part of us are we not choosing to make important enough? Because a part of it also, and this is one of my history lessons, was people pleasing. And
Mhm.
so being caught up in like being true to myself in quotes, but then as soon as somebody else asks me to do something, I say yes to them, ignoring my own needs. So I end
Yes.
up, invalidating my own agreements and commitments to myself. And so one of the biggest lessons I had to learn over the years, which I've become, I won't say masterful at, but certainly more balanced with, is that when people ask me to do things, I consider for myself before I say yes, does this work for me?
Mm,
And it doesn't have to be that I have another commitment. It could just be that for my own self respect, self care, doing that won't help me. It won't, and it is, and because I know if I do say yes to that, it's purely to get in their good books, not for my benefit.
mhm.
So it's that sense of making choices that are really self reflective and self honoring in the choices we make.
Yeah. That's such a hard one for so many people. They
Hmm.
really, the saying no, not that sort of automatic response of yes to everything, anything that's asked of you. It's for some of us that grew up in those environments, it's a very difficult emotion to feel. I mean, and not everybody by any means. I mean, I know so many people are like they can say no to anything. They're completely fine with it.
Indeed.
I will struggle with it. I'll feel bad. I will feel like I wasn't a good little girl if I didn't say yes. And
Absolutely.
it's a is that it's a growing point. It's definitely means that I'm getting stronger. I mean, remember my therapist used to say to me when my ex was angry with me, he'd say, "That's great. That means you're growing up. It means that you're standing up for yourself."
Hmm.
So rather than it be a bad thing, it was a sign of my growth. Put it that way.
Yes,
It was a
absolutely.
my growth. When somebody was upset with me that was used to sort of bullying and dominating me, when they were upset with me, it meant that I'd held on to that agreement, as you said, or that commitment to self first.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying the same thing. I definitely had experience when I was younger that saying no somehow would be affrontive to other people. That I shouldn't say no. I had to say yes. It's almost the wiring was that way. And so definitely, as I said, I've become much more balanced in how I do it because that was the way I was trained, so to speak, in the way I grew up. And so to have volition and self determination to say no was a definitely a growing edge to get into. So I totally relate to what you're saying. That was something that took me a while to get, and it took a while to become consistent because it's always like the temptation was to fall back into the old pattern of just saying yes because it's easier,
Hmm.
and it seemed more because again, growing up from approval seeking, saying yes was the way to get approval. So of course I say yes more often because I didn't know how to prove it myself first.
Yeah,
That's all teaching on itself.
yeah. It's such an important subject. And going back to, I mean, just that those are. I love what we've covered. You know, that the commitment isn't just to others; it's to yourself.
Yes.
You know, I mean, foremost should be to yourself to really know what your own, what's good for you, what's not good for you, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. To really take the time to sort of almost have a template to, you know, a healthy template to
Hmm.
just to understand yourself before you get sucked into, because there's certain people that could be very persuasive or threatening or bullying or whatever it is. So to
Yeah.
really go ahead of time, to go into these conversations, say with difficult people, uh,
Right.
what your boundaries, we talk about boundaries all the time here, but healthy boundaries, what's healthy for you before you even engage with somebody, so that you're, and it doesn't mean that you sit there and you're like, no, never, I'm never going to move, this is it. I'm not budging off this. I don't.
Hmm.
But just to know that, you know, oops, yeah, I tend to have a side of me that sort of gives in if I feel a little bit bad for the other person or whatever. So, you know,
Right.
just doing that before you go into something, I think is very, very healthy.
Yeah. The whole um, approval experience. That's something I learned, God, years and years ago. Just recognizing how I know from my own upbringing that I was always looking for someone else's approval to be fed, almost like I didn't have enough of my own, so I keep looking outside for it. And learning how to turn on that force inside, so to speak, to prove it myself meant the need to go outside diminished, and it actually gave me a lot more freedom because I was no longer like looking for someone to get fed from all the time, like desperately seeking to get that fulfillment from somebody else.
Yeah,
And yeah, it was such a game changer once I did get that shift happening more frequently. And that's the thing is that in our journey in our lives, it's so interesting watching our parental influence, especially from a lot of our clients in definitely in their own relationships, how the parents' influence is still happening, how the way their parents raise them, good, bad, or indifferent, is still impacting how they relate to their partners and how they relate to themselves. And so learning autonomy and becoming more autonomous with our own self choices is fundamental.
yeah. And it's, you know, and it can definitely be, you know, parental, environmental, also cultural. I mean,
Hmm.
just really do think that, you know, we grew up in the UK, and, you know, I know culturally it was, you know, stiff upper lip, show up for other people, give them the shirt off your back. You know, you were really encouraged to be selfless and giving and being a good person. You know, bad people were selfish, good people, you know, didn't think about themselves. So you really just, and I'm just trying to think. It's so, I think it goes deeper than just family, and I think we are entering into a time it's very different. I mean, we're encouraged to stand up for ourselves. We're encouraged to have healthy boundaries. Whereas I think when we were younger, I went to also I went to girls' Catholic school, so I had
Mm.
very much that sort of the nuns' influence on me as well of what was a good person, what was a bad person. Um, so I've had to get over that as
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
well. A little bit of Catholic guilt there. So
Hmm.
but yes, but I do see, I notice with my own children when I think to when, if I'd ever said no to my mother about something, the shaming I would have got would it was just so, and the abandonment and the rejection. was so much that it just wouldn't have entered into my radar to say no to
Right.
anything, even if my insides were screaming, no, I don't want to, I don't like this. It was, I had to go along with it. And I noticed when my children, in raising them, if they were ever to say, no, I don't feel like it, I don't want to do this, it always struck me. I was so proud of them in that moment. I
Mhm.
thought, wow, you have something that I didn't have as a child. You
Right.
have that part of you inside of you that can say no, and that can self-advocate and say, this doesn't work for me. I think it was just always such a clear, wow, this generation is different. And now, having said that, they're now called the me generation, and we're now everybody's too selfish. The happy balance there of maybe the pendulum has swung a little bit the other way, but I think to be able to self advocate as a child or a young adult is really important to empower children that way.
Yeah, it's just there is definitely a contrast. And speaking in a parallel to what you said, we're going through the Catholic school, girls' school, definitely adds a lot of that stacks a lot of extra weight on that pressure to be conforming and fitting in. I think a lot of things I remember growing up with was not even knowing my own voice. It's almost like I was in a place where I would let other people's voices be more, I won't say controlling, but certainly louder than my own inner voice. So I didn't listen to myself. Other people's voices input, whether it's my dad or my sit on my peers or people around me, that I let them guide me rather than me guiding myself. And
Yeah.
that's something maybe the kids nowadays have a more sense of self, but that's not quite as much a default for them. They tend to have more autonomy, although frankly, I think a lot of them nowadays are letting social media guide them instead of other people. So it's more through the phone than it is through in real life.
Mm,
So I think the same problems may exist with some of the younger generation that I went through as younger for different resources, but the same understanding and really learning to trust our own voice, our own um, resource of who we are, so that we become more responsive to what's happening around us versus just saying yes to whatever's going on and becoming a slave to other people's choices, which is what I know I did as a kid.
mm. And the thing is, gosh, my mind had such a thing. As you were speaking, I had this like, this is oh, I know. We're not taught this. That's the thing.
Right. Hmm.
Not taught it. We, as I mean, I certainly taught my children because that's what I had studied for so many years, and the spiritual understanding that I had, which is we have our own internal guidance system, we have our own internal wisdom. That's who we listen to. You know,
Yeah.
our our judgment about ourselves is what's important, not how other people judge us. Are we happy with how we showed up in a situation? Are we proud of ourselves, not other people? To the point, actually, I used to almost never say to my children, "I'm proud of you," because it was almost like it's like you're good because I say you are. I would say something like, I'm so happy for you that you feel this way or you whatever. But the I'm proud of you was used certainly when I was growing up as I bestow you with this in my approval. Oops, I take it away. So I was very sort of wary of being, in that sense. But my God, if all children were raised to know that we have this internal guidance system and that that's who we listen to, not other people, not outside of ourselves, it would be huge. It's so missing it's certainly in our culture, certainly in our schools. But I would even say, even in religious communities or spiritual communities, I think more so in spiritual communities we talk about it. But I'm trying to think even in, like I was saying, being raised in a Catholic school, even though my mother wasn't Catholic, it was a private school and she wanted to send us to a private school. But I was never taught by the nuns to trust myself, to listen to myself. I mean, the
Oh,
message was, you're broken and you need to be fixed in the eyes of God, which means
yeah.
in their eyes. And it absolutely messed with my head so much, as well as all the other damage. But
As well as all the other damage. That sounds good. But, no,
it's,
but
well,
that point, sorry,
well,
what's it?
No, I'm just saying as much as, yeah, I mean, just, growing up without a father, growing up in a home full of mentally disabled people, yeah, there was a lot of damage there, I will say, but the
Yeah.
nuns, the nuns played a part in it too. We all,
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I don't go down this road too far because we could get in a whole different conversation. But a lot of people in the religious teachings oftentimes tend to, I'll say this, they give over their power and authority to something outside themselves,
mhm, yeah,
and it's almost unwillingly because that seems to be the teaching is that to get where you want to go, which is to get to heaven, whatever that feeling is, you have to sacrifice who you are to do that, which is unfortunately for me backwards. There's for me, and I know I'm a rebel on this case because I said I've been in the spiritual path for many years. Is that really being true to ourselves is the way to get to quote heaven, which is what we how we experience life on earth. But again, not to go down to road too far, but remembering that all these religious teachings or political teachings or societal teachings are advisements to our own autonomy, our own well-being. We don't have to blindly believe what we're told by anybody or anything, no matter what badge, honor, salutation, title they have. They're only offering advice. And we don't have to say yes to everything automatically. In fact, the best thing we say is, let me consider that and then get back to you. And then
that's
say yes when we choose to.
a show, Barry. That's a big one. We should
Yeah.
definitely talk about that. But going back to this one for a second, just to wrap this up,
Mhm.
just with the
Yeah.
agreement
Yeah.
and the commitments. Um, Clarity. That's the other thing. Clarity. My God, we make assumptions with each other all the time. But I thought this because of this, and you said this, and it's like, no, clarity, and have very clear um, commitments that you reevaluate. Like I think I've shared before, one of my spiritual teachers has the State of the Union meeting with her husband once a week, and
Hmm.
then have a date night, which is a complete fun date night. But State of the Union is to really discuss, or they have to work together as well. So they are, often their marriage is also their business partnerships. So it can influence it. So they have very, very clear meetings where they will discuss: are we both happy with the state of our union? Are we communicating well? Are we fulfilling our agreements to each other and our commitments to each other? So I definitely highly recommend that. And then also just wanted to add, if it's because all we talk about relationships, we're not just talking about romantic relationships here.
Correct.
As we mentioned earlier, we're talking about the relationship with you might have with your parents or with your children. But in business, again, have clear commitments, even if you have to have it, legally protected or something like that, because there is so much enthusiasm usually in the beginning of a relationship or a coming together of an idea. If it's a business relationship, and it's always, oh yeah, they're the best, they're great, I trust them so much, and it's going to be a wonderful. And then it's like something didn't turn out like you thought it did. Just do
Right.
the legwork ahead of time. Have it written out. What is it that you expect of each other? What is the commitment you're making to each other? And have it notarized, have it something. But again, it just clears up any misunderstanding, and it just keeps you in integrity as well.
Hmm.
I mean, integrity with yourself. If you've outlined exactly what you're committing to, you know if you've broken that or not. You know
Right.
if you're not following through. So I think I just wanted to add that. Any last words, Barry, on that one?
Um, just simply to say that what we talked about in this episode is a reminder that to quote Shakespeare, "To thine own self be true."
Mhm.
To really listen to yourself, and when you feel yourself, and this is the thing, is you may keep saying yes to other people without thinking about it, but you'll feel something up inside that doesn't match that. Some part of you goes, not clear. Start tuning in to listen to the inside guidance because you might discover some really magical things that can happen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's so true. I don't think I mean, I shouldn't say I never ask for advice, but unfortunately, I really don't think I do because it's such a strong inner knowing that I trust.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, but again, as we were saying when we were younger, it was like, you know, we looked for outside validation and outside approval and advice. So, yes, definitely listen to your inner wisdom.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. That was another fast show there.
Indeed.
Good week, everybody, and we will see you next week. Take
Take care
care.
of yourself.
Bye bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode, fresh and shiny, as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.